Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff operations officer, assisted the national security team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the vice commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Explanation or apology. Keith Ellison is the Minnesota Attorney General, whose office just received a subpoena from Donald Trump's Department of Justice, and he joins me now. I want to start with the subpoena and then ask you about some of the things we're seeing, because that news just broke. Sure. It was reported on Friday night that they would be sending subpoenas out, I think, to Governor Walz, Mayor Frey, and yourself. I believe you have received the subpoena. What can you tell us, and what's your response?
We're going to look it over, and we'll respond according to law. I can tell you, though, they're announcing investigations from all of us, and you mentioned three of us here in Minnesota. Actually, they're messing with the brand new mayor of St. Paul and the Hennepin County attorney. But they're not investigating the person who ended the life of Renee Good. There's no investigation on that at all. And so it's a little bit ironic, as we're doing the work that we're elected to do by our constituents, standing up for our states, insisting upon the dignity and the rights of the members of Minnesota. They have not done anything close to what they should do when it comes to investigating a homicide. And again, I make no conclusion as to how the case should end up, but they have overtly and very deliberately stated we're not investigating anything. No one in the federal side is investigating the death of Renee Good. Now, explain that.
In fact, we should say there's reporting that indicates that the FBI, at least an FBI agent or...
Back to Truth Thursday and No Tie Thursday, too. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast, where America is challenging tyranny inside and out. And it's an imperative to the survival of freedom, literally. America's Marxist-Islamist-led insurgency, that's what I call it, is heating up in the frozen city of Minneapolis as Governor Walz, Attorney General Ellison, I call him Antifa General Ellison, for his support of that terrorist group, and Mayor Frey got DOJ subpoenas in the last few days. And we're seeing mobs of Somali immigrants stalking ICE operations and agents and accosting innocent citizens on the street, asking for their papers to make sure they're not ICE. Not to mention independent reporters like Nick Sortor being assaulted, really being assaulted by them and robbed of thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment. The entire left-wing finance network of Antifa-based terrorists is activated in Minneapolis, as indicated by the Black Lives Matter-led incursion into a Southern Baptist church service that none other than former CNN employee Don Lemon participated in as an active member of the group. There, I said it. I saw the video, Don. You're a liar, saying that you were just there to do journalism. There are indications that other large and small city cells are taking direct action in support of the Minnesota cells. And that should be of heightened concern to all of us. Not more than a mile and a half from my house, the next major intersection down from my home was an anti-ICE demonstration just yesterday in little old Gulfport, Mississippi. So pay attention, folks. Pay attention. Layered all over this domestic activity, the Trump administration is aggressively implementing its national security strategy through high-impact short military action like the little operation 2 weeks ago in Venezuela, revealing new types of weaponry, as the president said in Davos yesterday, while it is seeking peace in places like Gaza with its Board of Peace concept and reaching an agreement with NATO over Greenland. No surprise to me, but a surprise to many of the old, failed globalist cabal. Well, my guest today is independent journalist Matt Tardio. As a Green Beret, Matt, led several operations in Afghanistan that decimated ISIS-K, didn't lose a single Green Beret casualty. That's amazing. In addition to his time in the military fighting against terrorists around the world, Matt's gained knowledge and experience as a police officer. He trained numerous SWAT teams and officers to respond to active shooter situations, and he's also the host of Speak the Truth, which you can find on YouTube at Speak the Truth Actual, at symbol Speak the Truth Actual. Matt, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
I mean, it's good to finally be able to sit down and talk to you one-on-one.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming back on, man. It's been a while, over a year, since the first time you came on. Look, you know, the subpoenas is what I was going to lead with, but now we've got arrests being made by the DOJ, and latest I heard was at least the black woman who I'm pretty sure is a BLM activist and NAACP attorney, and then Crazy Willie, the piece of crap stolen valor veteran, the guy that was doing all the yelling and screaming inside the church, have both been arrested. One on the KKK charges and one on the FACE Act. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a mouthful to respond to. Where would you want me to begin here on this one? Yeah, so the lady that organized it, she's a civil rights attorney, both of them, right? The co-conspirators there in that one, they're both civil rights attorneys. So I don't think they're going to get off at all. If anything, judges look at that, you know, extremely more harsh than they would anybody else. It's like when a cop gets arrested for breaking the law. And here you have a civil rights attorney that's violating the civil rights of parishioners inside of a church. Nothing could be more offensive. And then she goes on TV the next day trying to defend herself, saying that she did the right thing, and goes so far as to blame. What was her excuse for it, Rob? Do you remember? It was, I think it had to do with kids. No. It was because they're pulling kids out of the schools. Because they're pulling kids out of the schools, therefore, you know, we're allowed to do this. And then she also cited another reason about ICE being in the town, which was, you know, throwing flashbangs and CS gas at her kid, at some kid in the car last week. And so it's all getting out of control. And it turns out that the parents of that child left 45 minutes before that incident while people are busting into vehicles, ripping weapons out, everything else. The parents are on the street partying it up with their kid in the car. And then they go online and they raise $170,000 for themselves or whatever it was, just shy of $200K. And then we find that out yesterday. And she claims that on the news as well. When we start talking about the stolen valor guy, I don't know if he is or is not stolen valor. I've seen people claiming it. I was on to him when he was back over in Washington, D.C. And he was walking around, and it was after the National Guard soldiers had been shot by that terrorist. And he was going up and just the same stuff he was doing in the church, but he would do it to National Guard soldiers. And part of me wonders if he's not stolen valor, because there, you know, in the Army, there is, I mean, the way the uniform is worn on your left shoulder, you have whatever unit you're in, you have the unit patch for the unit you're in. On your right shoulder, you have a combat patch. And he was yelling at these soldiers, and one of them was most certainly wearing a combat patch. And I'm pretty sure he was talking directly to him when he says, "Y'all ain't done nothing for your country. I'm a combat infantryman." But in the same video, he also admits that he has a problem with authority, and so he didn't do very good. So I'm wondering if he didn't get, you know, kicked out of the military at some point in his time, because those people don't make it very far. And if he did go to Afghanistan, I got a feeling that he was guarding water bottles and nothing more, because you don't even trust somebody like that to be on the radio. I wouldn't want somebody like that on the other end of the radio when I need help. You know, I wouldn't even have him on talk guard. You know, he would literally be watching water bottles and taking out trash and trying to probably brush his teeth after looking at them. So
see, this is why I wanted to get you on, because this is a complex subject, and you're the first person with law enforcement, Green Beret, and independent media experience that I've had the opportunity to have on with this situation, Matt. From a law enforcement perspective, the reporting that I've seen shows that state police and Minneapolis police were actually at the church and failed to respond. Is that accurate, number one? And two, you've trained people in critical and crisis responses that are law enforcement officers. What are your thoughts on that? That just blows me away as somebody that's commanded a 630-man law enforcement operation in the Air Force.
Yeah, absolutely atrocious that took place. I mean, at all, that they if they were there and they did respond to the scene, but they refused to go inside of the church, that's a problem within itself. That is a problem within itself. And I think it actually goes to show something a little bit deeper, because the mayor of St. Paul went on TV. And the mayor of St. Paul also believes that those actions were justified, that nobody's civil rights were, destroyed, and that it was nothing other than protesting. So now I'm wondering whether or not the mayor and the police chief gave a directive not to intervene in quote unquote protests. And knowing that it's a civil rights attorney, I got to dig into this lady, the two civil rights attorneys. I got to dig into them to see what ties they had with the mayor's office. Because now, if these civil rights attorneys reach out to the mayor and said, hey, we're going to go to this church on Sunday and protest, the mayor doesn't warn the staff. The mayor doesn't put law enforcement on the ground to make sure that disorderly conduct isn't taking place. At a minimum, you could look at a municipal statute for disorderly conduct probably that those officers could have intervened on. And not to mention trespassing, right? We can talk about that a little bit if you want. But it makes me wonder whether or not that, she did give that order, or if she gave that directive, if that directive came down. And the DOJ right now, with what they're looking into as far as subpoena goes, she's also one of the ones that's flying under the radar that got a subpoena. We were able to take a look at Jacob Frey's subpoena, the mayor of Minneapolis. And all of the information that they're looking in, it's not for Jacob Frey, it's for his records office, for the office of the mayor, for the records office. And they're looking at communications, and they want to see, whether or not they mention immigration and what they're going to do about it. And so I believe that's what they're going to be digging into when they get into them, because if they can get rock solid communication from them conspiring to impede law enforcement investigations, it's going to be set in stone. But then again, I don't know if you saw this, the mayor of St. Paul, the city council had some legislation come across yesterday for a new municipal ordinance not to allow federal law enforcement officers to use city-owned property as staging grounds, a park, for example, and then deny access to other areas that would otherwise request a badge. Like you need badged access to get in. So the city hall, city buildings, things like that, but also picture courthouses, unless they have a warrant, right? So we'll see what happens.
I didn't see that one. That surprises me too. What is it your opinion? Here's my opinion. I'll just throw it out there. I'm not bashful about saying it. I think that the state of Minnesota, the city of Minneapolis, and now St. Paul, they're in a condition of insurrection at this point against federal law. Are you of the same mind as that, or are you taking a little bit different view?
No, I am. I'm of that exact same mindset. And I want people to listen to me when I say this, because back in October, November, when people were calling for the National Guard to go to Portland, and they were calling it, a war zone, and we need to get the National Guard out here immediately. And I step on the ground and I look around and I go, this isn't a war zone. You've got a bunch of idiots on one side and a bunch of people on the other side, all arguing. They're breaking local laws. They're breaking ordinance. They're breaking Oregon revised statutes. They're doing things like that. Obviously, they're breaking federal law, assaulting federal officers and things like that. Aside from that, do you need the National Guard? No, you need the Portland Police Bureau to do their job. And when I point out and I say, okay, well, let's look at Minnesota. This is one of those places that it is so deep that you must, you must come to the conclusion. There's no other conclusion that you can come to other than that there is an insurrection taking place that's being conspired against. There was also, where was it? New Jersey. I'm trying to remember the name of the city over in Jersey that I watched yesterday. He had said that he was talking to the mayor of Minneapolis, and the same law that they were looking at down in St. Paul, they were also looking at enacting over inside of the city in Jersey yesterday. So all of these uber liberals are all talking to each other. It's pretty clear on that scale. And the question just is, have they been, issuing illegal orders, and are people following those? That's what I really want to know.
Yeah. Could that be considered? We got to take a break here in about 30 seconds, but think about this question during the break. Is that considered when you're talking about elected official to elected official, a conspiracy to prevent federal law from being enforced, and in a conspiracy against people's rights? Because, as you said, this church invasion, it's a deprivation of these people's right to worship freely according to the First Amendment. So that's a question I think we need to talk about, and I want to get your take on the difference between this unrestricted warfare that you are experienced with and as a Green Beret, and what needs to be done about it. We'll be right back with Matt Tardio.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now, and we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
The President of the United States is never going to make a decision about what to do or what not to do based on how it might upset the violent left-wing insurgents. His obligation, what he is supremely committed to, is enforcing and upholding the sovereignty of the United States. I'm familiar with the video that you're referencing where a mob of Somali refugees swarmed ICE officers. And the profound contempt this refugee population that has built this nation has for our country, our flag, our law enforcement officers. And what I would just say to reassure your audience, to reassure you, is that under the new federal surge that has taken place and the additional assets that have been put in place under President Trump's direction, under Secretary Noem's leadership, we now have the resources we need not only to protect the safety and security of our ICE officers and our border agents and their operations, but to begin the work of identifying, disrupting, and dismantling these insurgent networks. As you mentioned, they're very coordinated. They have ICE spotters and ICE watchers. They use chats to communicate with each other, to identify the location, and then they train their insurgents on how to block ICE vehicles, how to try to free arrestees, and then they dox ICE officers, they follow them home, they follow them to where they sleep at night. So again, it's a sophisticated insurgency involving a large number of radicalized, extremist, violent left-wing operators stoked by the Democrat Party. The resources and strategy is in place now, and you're going to see significant numbers. There's already been in the recent days a huge increase in arrests of domestic insurgents, but those numbers are going to increase. And I just want to put this back to the American people. You said it, Laura. Americans voted in a landslide to uphold the sovereignty of this country. Americans, by overwhelming majorities, oppose mass Somali fraud. Americans, by overwhelming majorities, just oppose Somali refugee resettlement in principle. So the public is behind this. Minnesota was once a pristine state, perfect education, no crime, no unrest, no violence, and then they ruined all of it, Laura, and President Trump is saving it.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday and No Tie Thursday, too. My guest is Green Beret and law enforcement veteran Matt Tardio. And Matt, Stephen Miller used the term that I've used several times in the last few days. This is an insurgency. Now, is it covering every inch of ground in every city in the United States of America? Well, no, not yet, but it is coast to coast. Because of these networks that have been allowed to grow up and around these groups like Antifa and BLM that organize these folks, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want you to think about it too. You know, insurgencies, let's say, how many, 340 million people here in the United States of America, and they're just a fraction of the population. But you also have concentrations, within that insurgency in certain areas. We used to call them like pockets of insurgencies overseas. We have a huge pocket of insurgency over here. Well, when we take a look at Minnesota and we take a look at, let's say, the vehicle pursuit that ended up with the suspect crashing out, the officer getting in a foot pursuit, tackling the suspect, and then you have two people come out of their home, with a garden shovel and a broom, I think is what they said, or a shovel and a broom, and violently assault that officer. And then you end up having the suspect get armed as well. So they probably handed one of those weapons off to the suspect, who then beat the officer, who then had to pull out his service weapon and shoot the guy. How deep of an insurgency are we talking about in the state of Minnesota? When an officer that's in a pursuit ends up having that situation happen to them, what are the odds that happens in any other state in America? Right? Not just the vehicle pursuit, the crashing out, but two people from the neighborhood coming out with weapons and assaulting the officer, then arming the suspect, who then beats the officer while they stand by, who then gets shot. What are the odds that happens in any other city in America? And that is very, very telling for how bad it is. Very, very telling.
Yeah. Another indicator that I saw, I don't know if you saw any video of this, is that you have these disruptors. I call them terrorists. I think they are terrorists. They're using violence and intimidation to achieve policy changes that are in neighborhoods, accosting people walking down the street because of the way they're dressed and asking for their papers and all kinds of things. And they have no government authority whatsoever.
Yeah, no, it's domestic terrorism. Like, what's taking place there is domestic terrorism. You know, this is the United States of America. We have a constitution. We have laws that get enacted by our legislative branch, signed and enforced by the executive branch, interpreted by the judicial branch. If you don't like those laws, you don't take to violence. That's what your elected representation's for. And if they can't get the laws passed, you say, okay, we'll move on. I will still complain. I will whine. I will protest peacefully, like actually peacefully and lawfully. You know, just because you say you're protesting doesn't mean you get to break the law and bust into a church, right? Which is what these people are finding out real quick. You know, Rob, you asked me over the break, you asked me to think about conspiracy, right? And I think absolutely conspiracy applies. But I have a question for you. Would you consider a foreign terror organization an enemy of the United States of America? One named, documented by the United States. Take the IRGC, take Hezbollah, named FTOs. Would you consider them enemies of the United States of America? And I'm asking that for a question.
Absolutely, they're enemies of the United States of America.
So I look at this, and I'm going to read you a definition of something, all right? And I want you to think that inside the jails that are over there in the state of Minnesota, that, you know, the DOJ has been complaining that they put immigration retainers on these folks and they won't give them over. Let me read you a definition. Whoever owning allegiance to the United States levies war against them or adheres to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort within the United States or elsewhere, is guilty of treason. So do we have them giving aid and comfort by holding them in the jails? And that's my question that I have. You know, conspiracy is one of those things. But the other thing that I'm looking at is they are labeled FTOs for a reason. And those are members of foreign terror organizations that are likely sitting in their jail cells. And I don't have the resources and access that the DOJ does to look into that. But my question is, if we have a governor, a mayor, multiple, you know, like of the major metropolitan area, you know, over in Minneapolis, multiple city mayors, the you know, Minnesota AG, and they're all conspiring for treason, in my opinion, if they're not willing to turn them over, if there is a known terrorist inside that jail and they're not willing to give them out. They're giving them shelter. They're giving them aid. They're giving them comfort. I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. That's why I've called for the president to go ahead and declare the Insurrection Act. I think he's being more than patient with this situation. That's definitely beats the definition of the phrase for treason against the United States of America. All it takes is one of the narco terrorism members that's been declared a foreign terrorist organization, or Tren de Agua. I think that group has also been separately named as a foreign terrorist organization. That's all it takes is one for them to be charged with that crime, and we should be looking at that. I'm glad the DOJ is acting. Didn't take them very long in this case, because they have the goods, they have the evidence to go forward on this. I wanted to ask you before we dive into a little bit of unrestricted or unconventional warfare discussion. I wanted to ask you about the potential arrest of Don Lemon. I guess some judge has stopped it. Do you see a First Amendment issue there from a freedom of the press perspective? That on the face of it, I mean, I've watched two videos of him. One where he tried to claim that, and the other where he's like being buddies with the people that invaded the church and everything. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, so he's trying to hide behind the First Amendment, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm just going to go ahead and cover my tracks and state all of this is my opinion, what I'm about to state on Don Lemon. He's trying to cover his tracks. And one of the hardest things to prove under the law is intent. And so in order to prove intent, we have to look at somebody's actions beforehand. And that includes his travel to and from the state. And I know from a video that he posted, it certainly appeared as if he was in the airport flying out that evening when he was, complaining that everybody was ticked off at him. So it looked like he flew in particularly for this event. And then the next question is, okay, well, you flew into town for this event. Why did you choose to go to this event? Why this protest? Because protests are taking place everywhere. Why didn't you go down to the Whipple building where everybody else is at, where violence and fireworks and everything goes? Why did you choose this protest in particular? And then why did you also bring everybody donuts and coffee and start chumming it up with them? He also did an interview with one of the women that got arrested, one of the organizers of the event. He actually interviewed her beforehand. I believe there's a photo from his interview of him like kissing her on the forehead. Yeah. And he claims that he had no idea where they were going, but there's a problem with that, Rob. You know what the problem with that is? When he got in the vehicle, he asked his driver if he knew where he was going. The driver's like, yep, or if he had the address. And he's like, yep, got it. He's like, all right, good. So he's not just following people around. And his statement was he didn't know where they were going and they just happened to follow them there. Nope. You were given the address. You knew exactly where it was going. And so you're chumming it up with the leader. You're doing all of that. To me, he is the propaganda wing, almost like the Al Jazeera of, Hamas. You know what I mean? But for the protesters over inside of Minnesota. So that's how I see it. There's also another issue with him criminally, is you have the pastor. Let's say they don't even want to do that. Let's say they don't even want to charge him there. Let's say you can't get the federal judge to sign off on it. And we all know that the mayor and the police chief over there in that town don't have, the intestinal fortitude to actually do it. But the pastor in particular told Don to leave the property. During his interview, told Don to leave the property. Now, this is the interesting part when it goes into trespassing. Places that are open to the public, like a church, they're welcome to everybody, right? Sure, I could show up to that church and walk in and it's open to me. And it's the same thing for your porch. Right? If the porch of your house, as long as there's not a fence outside that says keep out, no trespassing, clearly marked with, certain size signs and all that stuff, church isn't going to have that. So he's not trespassing automatically by going in there. But the moment he gets asked to leave and told to leave, and I saw several people telling these guys to get out of the church, they're all trespassing, which is another reason why the police should have been in there doing their job. Because quite frankly, they weren't. And so on top of that, you have the police that are failing to provide equal protection under the law to their own citizens. And that's also a problem. Don should be arrested, in my opinion, on about 1,000 different charges when you take a look at what he did. But it's absurd to me when you take a look at those facts of his actions and what he did. I think it's more than reasonable to lay out a probable cause, affidavit or criminal complaint in this case to a judge and have the judge go, yes, that makes sense. Just because the man states that I was there doing that doesn't mean, I'm there exercising my First Amendment rights. No, sir, your First Amendment rights stop when you start violating that of others. No right in the Constitution is absolute. Not a single one. You have to get a concealed weapons permit. Police can do warrantless searches and seizures, right? These are all things that everybody knows. So you don't get to just claim in this case, press is absolute, because what's going to happen is you're going to start having people that are going to be going around to different mosques and everything else, and they're going to be repeating this. Yeah. And if they set the standard right now for this, that it's okay as long as you're holding a camera, claiming to be a journalist and exercising your First Amendment right, and you get told to leave the property and you don't do it, then we have a whole other issue on our hands, and it's going to get bad. Yeah. It's going to get very bad very quick. So they're setting judicial precedents right now, whether or not they choose to ignore this. And that judicial precedence is going to go down to whether or not, those federal judges and the mayor, everybody else is actually going to respect the constitutional rights of everybody else. It's quite frankly appalling that it's taken this long.
Yeah, and this is I'm glad you brought that up about how things are going to get worse. This is an evolutionary step on a trail that we've already been on for quite some time. When police in New York City allow protesters to aggressively protest outside of St. Patrick's Cathedral every Sunday and disrupt the parishioners trying to get into Mass and leave Mass and those kind of things, they're on the outside, but they allow that to continue. This is the next evolutionary step on attacks on religious institutions, to go inside and intimidate and scare the kids and scare the elderly and those kind of things. We'll be right back with Matt Tardio. It's Truth Thursday, and we're going to tell the truth about what's going on in America and around the world, and we don't care what people think about it. We're telling the truth because America needs to hear it. We'll be right back.
So now our country and the world face much greater risks than it did ever before because of missiles, because of nuclear, because of weapons of warfare that I can't even talk about. 2 weeks ago, they saw weapons that nobody ever heard of. They weren't able to fire one shot at us. They said, what happened? Everything was discombobulated. They said, we've got them in our sights. Press the trigger, and nothing happened. No anti-aircraft missiles went up. There was one that went up about 30 feet and crashed down right next to the people that sent it. They said, what the hell is going on? Those defensive systems were made by Russia and by China. So they're going to go back to the drawing boards, I guess.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and my guest is Green Beret and law enforcement veteran Matt Tardio, and I call him an independent media journalist too, because I see him out there doing independent media work all the time and risking his life, doing a service for all of us, like a lot of other of our friends are doing every day. And Matt, I wanted to ask you, the Green Beret detachment teams, their primary function, I don't think most people understand it, is to go into countries that have an indigenous population that are, and you guys train them to resist, to basically be insurgents against the tyrannical government and those kind of things, right?
Yeah, unconventional warfare is what it's called. Correct.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you see these terrorist acts on U.S. soil, like what's happening with these activist groups and protesters, demonstrators, whatever you want to call them, the insurgents, do you feel like you're looking in a mirror at what you have trained other folks to do around the world? You see any similarities?
Yeah, a little bit, minus, well, okay, so there is, but in my opinion, there's foreign influence and foreign help that goes into it, that I've noticed over the last year, since I've been looking into a lot of this stuff. And I say that because, let's say, some of these radical sites, some of these radical leftist sites and stuff that I've came across, and we're not even talking about on the Tor browser or the dark web. We're talking about on the World Wide Web, like regular internet. If you've got the address, you can make it in there and you can take a look. Homemade explosive books and things like that have been posted online. And I noticed that some of the recipes for some of those explosives are coming from what I would call some, I don't know, things that I'm familiar with from overseas, right? So I do believe that we have that. I also noticed that a lot of their talking points and things like that come from some of the America's enemies, right? That are pushing particular literature and everything else. Terrorism is taking like a different turn here in the 21st century. Before, when we looked at terrorism, we would look and we would say, we would think 9/11, obviously mass shootings, things of that nature, car bombs, suicide vests, all of that. But it's taken another turn now here in like 2025, 2026. So much, in fact, that, our government stood up the Malign Influence Center. And they are looking into these things, and they're naming countries such as Iran, Russia, China, that are going online. We had a guy get convicted of it just a couple weeks ago, known as the Butcher, that organized, I want to say it was the Annunciation Church shooting, if I remember correct, or I could be wrong on that particular shooting, but he organized and, pushed somebody online. You look at the January 6th pipe bomber, for example. He fits the bill of somebody that's going to be easily recruited and easily manipulated. His grandmother says that he's autistic, that he's got the brain capacity of like a 16 or 17-year-old. He was online going through different chat groups, trying to find pen pals in online chat groups. It certainly appears as if he was a homosexual male by his adult friend finder account that ended up getting posted online. And all of those things, and in the African-American community, being a homosexual isn't exactly, smiled upon, we'll say. So he's kind of like this outcast, like thrown off to the side. And if you take a look at some of these people that are on the ground at these different protests, you start to notice a pattern that goes in there, right? People are picking up on the transgender community. Look at Charlie Kirk's killer. People are picking up on the transgender community as being a major part in this. But what they are failing to realize is that that's also a very vulnerable population that can get pushed and influenced very, very well. And so, I do see evidence of it. In my opinion, I do see evidence of it. We could look at the second Trump assassination attempt down at the golf course in Florida.
Yeah.
You know, that guy spent a lot of time over inside of Ukraine. And I know for a fact he wasn't recruiting for the Ukrainian military, but on his Facebook page, he thought he was. Right.
Yeah.
They refused to let him join the military because he's kind of weird, refused to let him join the military. And he's posting people's pictures and names. You know, they're traveling from foreign countries that intend to go into Ukraine in order to fight. Well, what does that do? That allows Russia to get it. So he thinks he's recruiting for Ukraine. Who do you think's handling that guy? You know, he infilled into the bushes, if I remember right, to that golf course between like midnight and 2 a.m. or something. And what I heard was that they did not intend on going golfing until they were out at dinner that evening. So it wasn't like it was on their long-term plan of places to go and things to do, if that information is correct. So who gave him the intel to go hide his butt in those bushes at that hour of the morning? Because they hadn't decided on going golfing until that night at supper. So that means somebody's monitoring the golf course, letting them know, you know, picking up on these things of where he's going to be going. And the guy manages to infill and pick out a good spot on the straightaway. To me, what we're looking at is a lot of signs of foreign intelligence operating here on U.S. soil. Sometimes it's being done virtually. Sometimes it's being done physically. Sometimes, in my opinion, they're handling people that don't even know they're being handled by foreign intelligence. That's my take on it. And I think Antifa is just a tiny portion of it.
Yeah. Antifa is just easy to talk about because it's a group that people know the name of it now. But I've long believed that it's a foreign intelligence operation. The assassins on Trump, you know, it's typical, and Charlie Kirk too. Outcast, usually pretty bright. You know, have exhibited a level of intelligence, and they show some signs of some training, but not enough to look too professional. You know, and they're getting resourced with information that an ordinary person would not have. I mean, I'm glad you pointed that out about the golf course hit, because that's exactly right. I mean, where'd that information come from? Who gave it to him? You know, why was he prepared to act? You know, where did he get the resources? How did he know to set up that hide site that was as a shooter site the way he did? I mean, all of those things are big indicators to me. And that gets to what I wanted to ask you. As somebody who's trained other populations in unconventional warfare, I think you're seeing a reflection in a mirror back at you as to what you've trained other people to do. Shouldn't we be conducting a counterinsurgency strategy at this point, now that we've seen this vast network of organized groups that have great resources that are communicating together and more than likely with foreign influence forces that's stretching all across the country? And what should that look like inside the United States?
Yeah, so definitely taking care of the problem up top and making statements like your Don Lemons, your protest organizers, you know, all of those people. Yeah, they need to have charges pressed against them. But the other portion of unconventional warfare that I think people miss a lot is information operations, and misinformation and disinformation in particular. Right now, there's a story floating around online about ICE arresting like a 5-year-old kid in an elementary school or something. And reality is they were after the kid's father, and he ran off and left the kid. And this is an example of disinformation. When Elon Musk came out and he made the countries of origin known for all of the different X accounts, there were some very big, you know, pro-Trump, MAGA, you know, accounts and everything else that are pumping out disinformation and misinformation online. And they're based over in Turkey, Syria, Iran. You know, some of them were Eastern Europe, non-EU, right? So Russia, right? So we have those different countries that are doing that. And so reality is that we need to start looking at that here in the United States of America, because you have a right in America to the First Amendment. If you're an American citizen, you have a right to free speech. But the question that needs to be asked is, does somebody in Russia have a right to free speech in America? You know, does some Russian bot farm have, you know, a right to be broadcasting media to everybody over here in the United States of America when it's false media, it's disinformation, it's misinformation, because people are buying that and taking it all in. We look at TikTok, you know, short form contents eating our kids' brains. I mean, they even got a word for it, brain rot, you know, when it comes to some of the content that they consume. So we need to take a very serious look at all of these things and start asking questions, because Russia, all the way back in the day, are you familiar with the Naked Communist?
Yes.
By chance? Yeah. I mean, we're talking, what was that, 50s? Like mid 50s, late 50s, somewhere around that. And for those that don't, this was a former KGB agent that ended up flipping, and he has all of the rules, right, for what the KGB agents who were infilled into the United States of America during the Cold War, on how to ruin America from the inside. And if people watching the show were to go over and read over those rules, pretty much every single one that's applicable to this day that hasn't already passed in time is in play, right? And there's a reason for that. We're talking about one of the big ones that ought to stick out for a lot of the viewers here is taking God out of school in prayer on the basis that separation of church and state, right? Things of that nature are all in there. Promoting homosexuality and promiscuity. Right. And what do we see in the crowds that are out there that are currently doing those operations? Don Lemon, for example, man states he's a Christian. Well, sorry to tell you, Don, but you can't be a homosexual and a Christian. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
Right. And you definitely can't be married to another man living in sin, not fleeing from it and be a Christian. But they believe that, but it doesn't matter. Right. Because in their mind, they think they're okay because they've been brainwashed. So to me, a lot of it goes down to the information that people are consuming, and a lot of it is coming from overseas. And a lot of accounts, have been getting caught taking money from Russia and other foreign accounts that are coming to America, right, and doing that. And that's an issue within itself. So I mean, all of this needs to get looked at. And if it was me and I was going to attack this thing firsthand, that's where I would start. Because they're going after the younger generations. Over in Afghanistan, if we would have gone after those younger generations as just opposed to stacking bodies, right? Same thing over in Iraq. If we start looking at those younger generations and we understand that younger generation is then going to grow up and move up, we've got to take care of those things. It's just as important. And if anything, to me, it's more important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, when we look at all of the different influence operation campaigns that are out there, and you and I look at it from the perspective of using military forces to counteract and interdict those type of operations. But we have posse comitatus inside the United States, different authorities for different types of forces, Guard, Reserve, Federal, active duty military, and those kind of things. But don't you think it's time that the federal authorities and the Commander-in-Chief and Secretary of War take a hard look at this and start figuring out which authorities we can use? Because we could combat the narrative building coming in from outside of the country with Cyber Command, and those kind of capabilities. We don't have to give away secret capability every time we do an operation. But if we don't use our capabilities for national security and we just rely on ad hoc task forces amongst the different law enforcement organizations, I don't think that's a winning strategy, is it?
No. And I also don't think that, how do I want to say this? I look at, the Insurrection Act. I look at using federal troops on U.S. ground. I look at that as kind of like I do the death penalty. You better be dang sure when you choose to do that. And I think on a case-by-case basis in limited cases around the United States, Minnesota being one of them, that absolutely needs to happen. That it absolutely needs to happen, because when the local and the state governments are not protecting their citizens, it is the duty of the federal government to do so. And we have seen for how long now the federal government try to actually do their job. They can't even, you can't even have DHS do their job over inside of Minnesota. And so when it's at that point, it's at that level. I don't care if it's for one U.S. citizen. That is what the Constitution is for. That one U.S. citizen has a right not to live in fear, not to have, foreign terror organizations living around them. They have a right to that. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if you think it's your city. I don't care if you think it's your state, because the fact is the Supremacy Clause says otherwise, right? You don't get to do that. And the citizens that are in that state are primarily U.S. citizens. Right. Sure. Exactly, they belong. They might be a state citizen, but they are also U.S. citizens first and foremost. And that trumps whatever crap they want to throw out there.
Exactly right, man. Well, we got to take our last break. We're going to shift gears for the last segment. I want to talk with you about the Board of Peace. You've been to Gaza. You're a Green Beret veteran, those kind of things. I want to get your take. We got a little clip from Vladimir Putin in English when we come back in. It's Matt Tardio here on Truth Thursday.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage, and now, real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, And here, you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
As for our participation in the Board of Peace, the Foreign Ministry has been instructed to study the documents we've received, to consult and seek advice from our key partners, and only after that we will be able to respond to this invitation.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Truth Thursday, and my guest today is Green Beret veteran and veteran law enforcement officer Matt Tardio, an independent journalist, I might add. Matt, that was Vladimir Putin in a short clip of a longer statement he made about being invited to be on the Board of Peace, and that he's in discussions. And it was reported just before we came on the show that Steve Witkoff, is about to land in Moscow as part of these discussions. Yeah, you're one of the few people I know personally that have been on the ground in Gaza post October 7th, 2023, that have an understanding of that type of warfare that's happening there and continues really to happen there for the most part, but is dwindling and everything. First, wanted to get your thoughts on this plan altogether, and then on this Board of Peace concept and how that's going to play out in your mind in a place like Gaza.
Ooh, that is a complicated question. Very open-ended and very complicated. Wow. Yeah. So I'd say the biggest issue that they're going to have, number one, Hamas isn't going to lay down their arms, which is why this is going to be what it's going to be. It's just not going to happen. It's too in depth, and a lot of the society is having issues, which is why they're not being accepted anywhere else, right? Even Macron, who thought it would be a good idea to bring them in, ended up shutting the borders off to them. South Africa, who was screaming forever about the genocide up over in the international courts, wouldn't let people off the planes. When I was meeting up with the deputy foreign minister over there, one of the things that she had said was, the biggest issue that they have is, what do we do with these people? Because we can't move them anywhere. Nobody will take them. Egypt, of all places, will not even open, a small section of the Sinai to set up a temporary camp. I mean, that would be very easy. And the reason is because of the mentality of these people that are in there. So if you're asking me, is this going to solve the problem? The answer is no. You take people that are brainwashed since birth, and not a small chunk of the population, the vast majority of the population. That might offend some people, but I can quote Palestinian sources that'll tell you that 90% of the population's out of their dang mind in there. Right. But with that being said, what do you do with those people throughout this entire process? Because, rebuilding that place, let's say Hamas is finally wiped out. You go, if you kill anybody with a gun, right, that identifies as Hamas, good, they're gone. Your next problem is going to be demining that entire area. And I'll tell you, driving through Rafah, it's not even like rumors. Rafah's level, and rightfully so. I had the luxury of meeting up with Brigadier General Benny Gall and several other members of the Israeli military, and I was shown a target density map, and they take an actual additional process and step that the United States military doesn't when it comes to identifying, labeling targets, and everything else. And I was shocked. You can't walk down a city block in Gaza without crossing 2 or 3 different legitimate military targets, things that the United States would have no problem leveling. All right. So the fact that anything's left standing over there is absolutely insane to me. And there's a reason why they haven't, looked at Israel in the international court. And that sounds hard for people to believe, but what they don't understand is you've got over 2 million people, crammed into the city the size of Las Vegas that have been building for decades, this war. And so when you talk about demining Gaza, I'm not talking about, a battlefield over in Iraq or Afghanistan that maybe some of the U.S. war vets might be used to. I'm talking about just as bad as the front lines in Ukraine, if not worse in some places, right? So we've got a serious problem here, because you can't just cut the population loose to run over there, because they will be recovering munitions, because they have that crooked mentality that's been worked into them. You don't want them to have it. You can't just send in engineers to just go start plowing everything over, because then they're going to start getting blown up and die. And who's eventually going to want to do that job? So there's a huge demining, thing that needs to take place. And then tourism and everything else that goes into it. Gaza used to be beautiful before October 7th. It really did. It did. It had 5-star resorts in it, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? They're water parks.
Yeah.
This is all stuff. You can go look this up on Google Maps. This is not Matt Tardio making this up. You know, it's a beautiful place. It's sad to see, you know, so how that's going to work out, I don't think it's going to work out so good, to be perfectly honest and be quite frank. I don't think it's going to work out so good. But what I did notice was that a lot of the people in Gaza seem to be a lot happier with, we'll call them, you know, Israeli forces and the international community that was coming in to help. And the one thing that I got told from a man in Gaza was that until the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is no longer, you know, there, but until they had arrived, that they had not received a single ounce of free food. And you got to think about this, because you've got the UN World Food Program operating in there and several other things. So these people have been oppressed as well. So not only do you have a population that has been indoctrinated since birth, but you also have an extremely oppressed population. And those two things don't go very well. And so in my mind, I hate to say it, but you know, education is going to have to be huge in this part of it. You know, a lot of education is going to be definitely have to take part of it, especially if they want to be involved on the world stage or on the international community level. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and continue to fester. It needs to get taken care of. And I hate to say it, but education camps need to happen. And it sounds dirty, but when you look at what they've been through, I think it absolutely needs to happen. And unless things like that actually happen, I don't think you're going to have a success. Now, you're always going to have an issue with violent extremism in places like that after the majority of the fighting's said and done. But it's a generational issue, and it's going to take time. And I don't think people understand that. I think even Bibi said it's going to take 10 years. 10 years when this thing first started. 10 years before the conflict's over. Yeah. You've got to train up local paramilitary forces. You've got to train police forces. Try to look at the laws that were over inside of Gaza prior to this. You're not going to find any. You're going to find one loose document with a bunch of, you know, squiggly marks on it. But basically, it was Sharia law. You know, you had an issue, you take it to the mosque and let them figure it out. And that's a problem. So we're talking about retraining an entire population, an entire society. That's hard. You know, 2.3 million people now, I think, is the actual number. I think I said 2.2 earlier. I think it's now, you know, estimated to 2.3. It was 2.1 when it started. But that's a lot of people to re-educate. And then to build homes for.
25 miles long by 7 miles wide on average, something?
It's nothing. Like I said, I think it's like 25,000 square kilometers or something like that. It's nothing.
Yeah.
It's nothing. Yeah. But where do you put them? You know, while all this is going on? And I think the answer is going to be, you know, first they're going to have to clean out Rafah because the place is pretty much done for anyways. But then when you look at it, you've got the tunnel systems and everything like that are underneath.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what is the damage level in a realistic terms of the tunnel systems? Those are hardened underground infrastructure all over the place.
Yeah, they're hardened underground infrastructure built by kids making bottom dollar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of them do have concrete. Some of them do go pretty deep, but not all of them. And so let's talk about the common sense aspect here. Do I want to put a high-rise building on top of a tunnel that Hamas built?
Exactly.
On sandy soil.
Yeah.
You know, or like loose. I mean, that's a problem, right? So you have an entire engineering problem, subterranean and up, that needs to be solved. This whole thing needs fixed. And munitions that are mixed in. It's a nightmare of a scenario. I have no idea how they're going to solve it, to be quite frank.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, it's an interesting concept. The reason why I wanted to chat with you about the Board of Peace is I think, this is my opinion, that the destruction so far of the Iranians' ability to have direct influence through resources on Hezbollah and Hamas and the EIJ over in the West Bank has probably opened a small window of opportunity to get in there and get something done. But like you said, you know, the little kids in preschool dress up like Hamas fighters and they hate Jewish people. And honestly, they don't even want a two-state solution, do they? Because
no, they don't.
They don't want to be neighbors with the Jewish state of Israel.
It's not that they don't want to be neighbors. It's not that they don't want to be neighbors. They think it's their divine right to the land of Israel. And when people are confused when they hear occupied Palestine, they think they're talking about Gaza and Judea, Samaria, which we can get into the West Bank and we can say, listen, First of all, Jews were living there before y'all ended up having a huge uprising and killing a bunch of people, and Israel told their people to pull out, and then they just started going back in there. So we can have that conversation. But they're talking about, from the river to the sea, the Jordanian River, all the way out to the Med, all the way up into Lebanon, parts of Syria. They think all of that land is their divine right, and they're allowed to get that land through any means and methods, including rape, pillaging, death, torture. It doesn't matter. Lying. However they want. They think that land's their divine right given to them by Allah, and the Jews shouldn't live there. How do you live next to people like that are willing to kill you in order to take that land?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think it's interesting, this board of peace thing, because the president has brought in Putin. He's brought in President Sisi from Egypt. The Turks are involved now. The other Arab states that are part of the Abraham Accords are involved in this. Do you think that can have a positive impact on the potential to succeed on the way ahead in this peace process?
So as much as I hate bringing in BRICS nations on this, I think Russia helped to push the fighting with Hezbollah because it benefits their war effort. The more U.S. bombs are soaked up in the Middle East, or the less they get dropped over inside of Ukraine, the less that are available. But at the same time, and again, Egypt, BRICS nation, we need Sisi because we got to, the most common sense thing to do is to take the people inside Gaza and move them out for the reconstruction process and then move them back in afterwards. They can keep their land. But aside from that, the U.S. does have good leverage over Egypt. Everybody looked at Greenland and was like, there's no way this is going to happen. And Trump walks out and has a Greenland deal. And I think the same thing could be said for Egypt in order to make that happen. And I think, honestly, the people would be happy to do that as long as they knew that they were going to be allowed to return. But again, you have an education issue. You have people that have been madly indoctrinated. And I also think that, you're not going to have the Jews do it and you're not going to have America do it. You're going to need to have some Muslim nations that are able to go in there and actually help out with this, because they're not going to trust, Israel from doing that. So it's complicated. It is beyond complicated.
Yeah, and I think we're giving up we're giving up a little bit of regional power by having the Turks come in and be the ground force on the ground initially to try to secure the place, because it's widely known that Erdogan has a strategic perspective of a greater new Ottoman Empire. So it's a complicated situation as usual in that part of the world, Matt. Well, we appreciate you coming on. Tell folks where to find you, what you're up to here. I've got about a minute left. I want to give you the floor to pitch your stuff.
I appreciate you. Yeah. So you guys can find me over on X at Angertab, ANGERTAB, like Ranger with the R cut off, or just by searching Matt Tardio. You can find me on pretty much all your social media platforms just by typing that in. There are some fakes out there. You guys can watch me on InfoWars Monday morning. I'm going to take over for Brianna Morell, hosting her show on Monday morning. Other than that, Speak the Truth podcast on YouTube. I'm live at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time in the morning, and then again at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time.
All right, man. We appreciate you coming on. I'll get you back as things develop for sure.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me.
You bet. Well, Monday, more War Monday. I'll see you then on the Rob Maness Show.